During the 16th century, during the golden age of the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman army was in its prime. Its grand army went on campaigns against the strongest kingdoms in Europe, Asia, and Africa. Wherever they marched, they provoked fear into their enemies with their war cries and marching music. This standing army was one of the largest armies during its time, numbering around 250,000 men. But the Ottoman army wasn't always huge and powerful. The earliest form of the Ottoman military was a steppe nomadic cavalry force made out of men from the tribe of KAYI. The KAYIs were a nomadic group of Turks from Central Asia who had recently arrived in Anatolia during the late 1200s. The founder of the Ottoman state, Osman Gazi, was from this tribe, and his father, Ertuğrul Gazi, was their leader. After his father's death, Osman became the leader of the tribe, thus became the leader of the military as well. The Turkish states in western Anatolia were Gazi states, or states that were ruled by warlords who found glory by warring against infidels around them, or in this case the Byzantines and the Mongols. The early Ottoman army was made out of Gazi warriors who were a warband of mostly cavalry units called Turkomans. These Turkomans were armed with weapons like bows and spears, and were predominantly lightly armored, if not armored at all. These warriors were part-time soldiers, so they were disbanded after every military campaign. These warriors were given fiefs, or land estates called TIMARS, after military campaigns. Usually recently conquered plots of agriculture land in the countryside were given off to the Timurids, or Timur holders. The Timur holders were obliged to supply the imperial army with troops called Çelebi and provisions from their lands, and also join the Sultan's army during wartime, and to take care of lands that were entrusted to them by the Sultan during times of peace. When at war, the Timurids had to bring their own equipment to battle, so they were armed with various types of weapons. Early Ottoman expansion into Europe resulted in the Ottoman Sultans giving local Christian lords Timars to gain their loyalty and lessen the burden of conquest by giving the newly conquered people autonomy. Within generations, these Christian Timur holders would slowly convert to Islam as a way to gain further favor with the Ottoman state. As the empire grew, so did the Timur system. Most military Timurids also fought on horseback, in which they were called the Spy cavalry. This would become the elite cavalry force to the Ottomans for centuries to come. Next were the AZABs, who were peasant infantrymen that served along with the Turkomans, mostly as foot soldiers. They brought supplies to the front line, they dug roads and built bridges. On rare occasions, they were used as cannon fodder to slow down enemy advances during battles. A branch of AZABs, called the Bashibozuks, were also specialized in close combat and sometimes were mounted. They became notorious for being brutal and undisciplined on the battlefield, and were recruited from the homeless and criminals. Before the start of a military campaign in a region, the Ottoman Sultan would send out raiders or AKINCIs to scout out for enemy forces or simply to raid enemy land. Alongside the Turkomans, these two units would form the vanguard of the early Ottoman army. The early Ottoman army was not a standing army, so its soldiers didn't receive salaries from the state, but instead relied on looting as a source of income. This changed when Alaaddin Pasha, the brother of Orhan Gazi, reformed the Ottoman army into a standing army a full century before Charles VII of France introduced the system to Western Europe. Stable salaries for the soldiers were established for the first time during this period. These new infantry were called the Yayas, and the cavalry force was known as the Muslims. The force was made up by mostly foreign mercenaries for the most part, and only a few Turks were content to accept salaries in place of Timurs. Foreign mercenaries were not required to convert to Islam as long as they obeyed their Ottoman commanders. The Ottomans began to use guns and artillery by the late 14th century. It is stated in some sources that during the Battle of Kosovo, the Ottoman army used cannons against the Serbians. The artillery crews that were in charge of the cannons during these times were hired outside the empire due to the Turks lacking men that knew how to operate and maintain these cannons. By the time of Sultan Murat I, the Kapakula, or the Sultan's household troops, were formed. These troops were the Sultan's personal bodyguards who were loyal to him only. One of these branches of the Kapakolu troops were the Janissary Corps, but this deserves an entire video dedicated to itself. So, to simplify things, the Janissaries were elite infantrymen that formed the Sultan's personal army made out of Christian converts from the empire. While the Janissaries were the Sultan's personal army, the Solak Guard was his actual bodyguard during imperial ceremonies and wars. During the 1350s, the Ottoman army numbered around 6,000 men, around half of them being the AKINCI raiders. But the army would skyrocket up to 37,000 by 1389 during the Battle of Kosovo. This was mainly due to the Ottomans expanding into the Balkans and into Anatolia during the 1370s and the 1380s, thus having a greater pool of people to muster troops from. Of the 37,000 troops, over 10,000 were AKINCI raiders, 8,000 were AZAB peasants, 4,000 were Yaya and Muslims, and 5,000 were Sipahi cavalrymen who also brought an additional 5,000 Çelebi troops with them. And finally, 1,000 were the Kapakolu bodyguard, 500 of which were Janissaries. As the Ottomans vassalized a number of Serbian princedoms during the reigns of Murat I and Bayezid I, a couple of thousand Serbian troops also fought along with the Ottomans, most famously during the Battle of Rovine in 1395 against Wallachia. During the reign of Sultan Bayezid I, the Ottoman army doubled in size after Bayezid's major conquests into the Balkans and in Anatolia, which saw the army grow from 37,000 men to 81,000 men. 10,000 were the AKINCI raiders, 15,000 were the AZAB peasants, 8,000 were the Yayas and the Muslims, 20,000 were the Sipahis who also brought 20,000 Çelebi troops with them, and finally 2,000 were the Kapakolu bodyguards, 1,000 of which were the Janissaries. As the Ottoman army grew at a very fast pace, so did its army. The Ottomans were successful at organizing a standing army very early on, and this resulted in the Ottomans engulfing its neighbors with its manpower and coordination of troops. The organized structure and the discipline of the Ottoman army gave it an edge against European armies and other Turkic armies. During this time period, foreign European observers observed the Ottoman army. They were struck by the frugal diet of the Ottomans and the cleanness of their camps and their well-organized system of tents, all of which accounted for the absence of disease among Ottoman armies. They were also amazed by the quietness of Turkish encampments. The Ottomans organized their military in a way that had not been seen since the old days of the Roman Empire. Systems and traditions were created very early on into the creation of the Ottoman army. This efficiency to train and maintain troops and organize them into separate corps, each having different roles during battle, sprouted the rise of the Ottoman military as we come to know it during the golden age of the empire. Thank you for watching, and this has been Ege from the Ottoman History Hub, hoping to see you next time.